Did you know Napoleon once wrote a letter to an Indian king, planning to march his army all the way to India together? In the late 1790s, Tipu Sultan ruled the kingdom of Mysore in southern India. He was the last major ruler standing between Britain and total control of the subcontinent. Brilliant, fierce, and desperate for allies, he sent ambassadors to revolutionary France and opened negotiations with Napoleon directly. Napoleon had his own ambitions. His Egyptian campaign in 1798 was never just about Egypt. It was step one of a two-part plan to march overland, link up with Tipu, and strangle British power in Asia. The British knew about it. They were scrambling on two fronts at once, watching Egypt and India simultaneously, terrified both threats would land at the same time. And then, within months of each other, both collapsed. Tipu died, defending his capital Seringapatam in May 1799. Napoleon was driven from Egypt by autumn. 2 men, 2 campaigns, 1 window. It closed forever, and the British Empire never looked back. Did you know the Boston Tea Party wasn't actually about tea being too expensive? It was about tea becoming too cheap. In 1773, Britain passed the Tea Act. Most people assume it raised prices on colonists. It didn't. It lowered them. The British government cut out the local merchants who had been selling tea for years and handed the entire American market directly to the East India Company. Suddenly, legal tea was cheaper than the smuggled Dutch tea that colonial merchants had been quietly profiting from for decades. Men like John Hancock had built serious wealth on that smuggling trade. The Tea Act didn't squeeze ordinary colonists. It threatened the business empires of the colonial elite. So when protesters dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor, they weren't fighting a price hike. They were fighting a monopoly that cut them out entirely. And that's what made their argument sharper than most people realize. This was never just about tea. It was about who gets to control trade and who gets to decide. That question still doesn't have a clean answer. Did you know China once had the most powerful navy in history, then deliberately burned it all down? In the early 1400s, Admiral Zheng, he commanded fleets of over 300 ships. His largest vessels were 4 times the size of anything Columbus ever sailed. He reached Arabia and East Africa decades before Europe even knew those places existed. Then something extraordinary happened. Not a war, not a storm, a political argument. Confucian scholars at the imperial court despised the naval faction. They saw overseas voyages as wasteful, dangerous, and un-Chinese. So they fought back the only way court officials knew how, through paperwork, policy, and patience. They won. The shipbuilding records were burned. The treasure ships were left to rot. And by 1500, sailing large vessels beyond coastal waters became a crime punishable by death. Here is the part that changes everything. Portugal rounded Africa in 1488. Columbus sailed west in 1492. China was pulling back from the ocean at the exact moment Europe was claiming it. One political feud, permanent consequences. Did you know the man who built the Forbidden City was never supposed to be emperor? Zhu De was the 4th son of the Ming Dynasty's founder. The throne was never his. It passed to his young nephew, Zhu Yunwen, and that was supposed to be the end of it. But in 1402, after 3 years of brutal civil war, Zhu De marched into the capital, and his nephew vanished. Some say he burned alive in the palace. Others say he escaped in disguise. Nobody knows for certain. What we do know is that Zhu De took the throne anyway, and then something interesting happened. He became one of the most ambitious rulers in Chinese history. He built the Forbidden City. He sent Zheng. He crossed the oceans with the largest fleet the world had ever seen. He commissioned the Yongle Encyclopedia, nearly 23,000 chapters of human knowledge. But here is the thing. None of it was confidence. Every monument, every voyage, every grand gesture was an emperor trying to prove he deserved to be one. The ambition and the anxiety were the same thing. Did you know a Mughal empress openly ran an empire, and the court just let her? Nur Jahan was not hiding in the shadows. She was not whispering advice through a curtain. She was issuing imperial decrees under her own name, commanding military operations, and sitting in on negotiations with foreign ambassadors. Coins were struck with her name on them. Not Jahangir's, hers. This was not a secret. Mughal court historians wrote it down. European diplomats reported it back to their governments. The English ambassador Thomas Roe noted with visible frustration that she was the power he actually needed to reach. Her husband, Emperor Jahangir, struggled with illness and addiction. Nur Jahan did not seize control quietly. The state simply functioned through her, openly, for years. And here is what makes this story so important. For generations, colonial writers described the imperial harem as a place of seclusion and silence. But Nur Jahan's own documented record tells a completely different story. The harem was not a cage. Sometimes, it was the throne room. Did you know the Allied invasion of Europe was saved by a dead man with a fake girlfriend? In 1943, British intelligence needed Hitler to believe the invasion target was Greece, not Sicily. So they came up with something almost unbelievable. They found a corpse. Then they spent weeks building him a life. They gave him a name, a rank, a fictional fiancée named Pam. They wrote her love letters by hand. They tucked in personal photographs, ticket stubs, even a receipt for an engagement ring. Then they chained a briefcase full of fake invasion plans to his wrist, dressed him in a military uniform, and floated him off the coast of Spain, where they knew German agents were watching. The Germans found him. They read every letter. They believed every word. Hitler personally ordered his panzer divisions moved away from Sicily. When Allied troops landed in Sicily weeks later, the beaches were thinly defended. The entire operation worked because a dead stranger's invented love life felt real enough to fool the Third Reich. His name was Glinder Michael. He never knew he saved thousands of lives. Did you know the most confident letter in diplomatic history was also one of the most catastrophic miscalculations ever written? In 1793, Britain sent Lord Macartney to China with an enormous delegation, exotic gifts, and one goal: open trade with the Qing Empire. Emperor Qianlong was not impressed. He sent King George III a letter back that is almost impossible to believe. China had no need for British goods, he wrote. No need for British diplomacy. No need for anything the outside world could offer. The Qing Empire was the center of civilization itself, and Britain was simply a distant tributary nation that did not fully understand its place. And here's the brutal part. Qianlong was not entirely wrong about where his empire stood in that moment. But within 50 years, British warships would force open Chinese ports by cannon. Within a century, China would sign treaty after treaty under military humiliation. The letter reads today less like a rejection and more like a countdown clock. Total confidence, zero warning, and history waiting just around the corner. Did you know a monk committed treason just to go to school and came back famous enough that the emperor who wanted him arrested threw him a parade? In 629 CE, a Buddhist monk named Xuanzang slipped out of Tang, China in secret. The emperor had banned all travel west. Xuanzang went anyway. He crossed brutal Central Asian deserts alone. He survived bandits, blizzards, and mountain passes that killed horses beneath him. He reached India and spent years studying at Nalanda, the greatest university in the ancient world, learning directly from the finest scholars alive. 16 years after he left, he returned carrying 657 sacred texts loaded onto 22 horses. The same emperor who had banned his journey gave him a state reception. But the real afterlife of that trip is stranger than the welcome home. The detailed travel account Xuanzang wrote is now one of the only reliable records historians have for reconstructing 7th century India. Entire kingdoms, cities, and religious sites were rediscovered because of his notes. One man broke the law to find knowledge. He ended up preserving a civilization. Did you know a queen lost her entire empire and still walked away winning? Zenobia ruled Palmyra, a small client kingdom on the edge of Roman territory. But in 270 CE, she decided that wasn't enough. She conquered Egypt. She swept through Anatolia. At her peak, she controlled nearly a third of the Roman world and called herself Empress of the East. Then Aurelian came. Rome's most feared emperor marched east with his legions and crushed her forces in 2 battles. Zenobia was captured fleeing toward Persia. Her empire was gone in a single campaign. Most rulers in her position were strangled or beheaded. Aurelian gave her a villa in Tivoli. He was so impressed by her that he brought her to Rome not as a prisoner but almost as a trophy of civilization. She spent her remaining years as a respected Roman socialite, hosting philosophers and politicians. She built an empire from nothing, lost it to the greatest army on earth, and still negotiated her own survival. Some historians wonder if she saw that ending coming all along. Did you know the largest cavalry charge in history happened in a single afternoon and changed the fate of Europe forever? By September 1683, Vienna had been surrounded by Ottoman forces for 2 full months. Food was running out. The walls were crumbling. Surrender was days away. Then Polish king Jan Sobieski arrived. He gathered 18,000 winged hussars at the top of the surrounding hills. These were elite cavalry soldiers who wore giant feathered wings strapped to their backs, designed to make a terrifying sound as they charged. On September 12th, they came down, all of them, at once. The Ottoman lines collapsed within hours. The siege was broken. The long Ottoman push into Europe was stopped for good. But what happened next tells the real story. Ottoman Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha was strangled with a silk cord by his own emperor's messengers as punishment for the defeat, and the victorious Christian forces immediately started fighting each other over the credit. One afternoon changed history. Both sides then destroyed themselves trying to claim it.